Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 59 of Hangout with Coach Kerry. If you're watching us live, it's 9 a.m. Pacific. If you're watching this as a recording, you'll be seeing it either on the website or on YouTube. Make sure that if you're watching it on YouTube, you subscribe to my channel so that you make sure you get all the upcoming episodes. And if you opt in on my website to get my free ebook, you'll get notices also of upcoming episodes as well. So we want to keep you in the loop. So I suspect you're an entrepreneur, maybe even a solo entrepreneur. This may be you might be in business part-time, you might have a full-time job, you may have 50-50, you may be just starting out in your business. And you're here because something about the episodes that I do caught your attention and you want to learn more about developing a successful business. You know, business success doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen because of a good idea. It happens because you've developed business acumen and you can actually build on that and you can grow your business from there. So today, what we're talking about is a piece that I think sometimes people neglect to understand. And as a coach for 18 years, from my experience, it is the most fundamental piece to success in a business, assuming you have a good idea, assuming that your concept is, you've done your research. And that is your emotional self-awareness, that your self-perception, your self-belief, what's going on for you is the most important. How many of you can think of someone that you know who has a great idea, who sets goals, and maybe doesn't achieve that particular goal? Or you just, you look at somebody and you say, I just don't know why they're not successful. What's going on? Well, I suspect that if that person were to explore a little more, it would be about this self-perception that they have. That piece that we can, in the coaching world, we call your gremlin. It's also called your inner critic, your false self. It's got lots of names. What it is, though, it's that piece that sits as judgment on your shoulder, as I like to say, that it gets those outdated tapes going on in your head. And that's the piece that we're going to talk about today. I'm pretty excited about it because I believe that this is the fundamental underpinning of what I call high emotional intelligence. And I'm going to talk about the distinction between IQ and EQ. And then we're actually going to have a hands-on exercise today. So make sure you stay to the end of this episode to help you work on some of those self-limiting beliefs that you have. Because I believe they are the underpinning of good EQ, and that means that you're going to be functioning well. And I'm going to give you some definitions and all that kind of stuff. So this is going to be a really exciting episode. Before I go any further, I want to introduce to you my VIP panelist today. Grace is a regular on my show, and she brings great skills and ability to the work that she does. And I would like her to introduce herself to you and tell all of you what Grace does. So go ahead, Grace.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Grace Kerry, my business Graceful Solutions, and I help women overcome emotional eating patterns that get in their way of losing weight. And I do that with individual counseling, but also I have online programs. So one of the things I'm offering this week is a free call on Wednesday at 7 p.m. called Top 3 Reasons Women Regain Weight. And I also have a 4-week program coming up called Change Your Mind, Change Your Weight, which starts in early June. And you can find me at gracefulsolutions.ca.
Great. Well, I know you do incredible work with your clients, Grace. And so if anyone, whether you think that the topics that Grace is offering are for you or for anyone else you know, please do go check her out. So, okay, so today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and some of the really sort of introduction of it. And I'm going to put my glasses on because it helps me make sure that some of these notes that I've taken they'll be able to be clear what I want to say. So, success equals good people skills. And people skills have to do with really how we react and how we respond to people. So I'm going to introduce you to this concept of emotional intelligence for those of you who are maybe not that familiar with it. Emotional intelligence is really a series of overlapping yet distinctly different skills and attitudes in terms of how we function as individuals. And in business, really I've seen, as I sort of alluded to earlier, that success is not things like better marketing skills or marketing avenues. It isn't better financial management. It isn't even so much strategic planning, although I'm a huge fan of of strategic planning for clients. But really, at the end of the day, success in business really has to do with faulty communications, people's inability to understand other people, be able to see things from other people's perspective, setting goals and achieving them, the impact of our own actions on other people, view ourselves, how we express ourselves. All of those things make up emotional intelligence. And I believe those are more critical to success than the things that I talked about earlier, which is what I'm going to call the core business skills, which is marketing strategies, sales strategies, customer service strategies, all of that. So Grace, I know you and I have talked earlier, and what I want to do is just for the moment here describe to you a distinction between IQ and EQ, because a lot of people really consider, so what's the difference? Because IQ has got a lot more awareness in the marketplace than EQ is. EQ is not a fad. It's been around for a very long time. It's just taken kind of second fiddle to IQ. And IQ is important. IQ, tells us a lot of things. It's our rational, analytical, logical, and intellectual skills we have, and those are absolutely important. Yet I bet you every single one of you knows someone who is book smart, but not necessarily street smart. And street smart is what EQ is all about. So that's the difference between them. EQ is that purse about ourselves. It's that street smart. It's that common sense piece that just that sort of makes sense when we see it out there, when we're observing someone else, but we may not have had that well developed in ourselves, or we notice in other people. So it's that piece that we're talking about. So I'm going to read you an actual definition of it just to help you. So it's the ability to perceive emotions, access and generate emotions to assist thought, understand emotions and their meanings, and reflectively regulate emotions to promote emotional and intellectual growth. So you can see if there's a lot of the word emotion in there, and that isn't about whether you're emotional or not emotional. That has nothing to do with it. It's how we actually access our emotions to actually help us make good decisions, how we can develop empathy with other people, whether it's how we connect with a community. And I know, Grace, for you, you have a really strong sense of community and empathy in the work you do as a counselor. So those pieces for you are I just know automatically you have those well developed in your emotional intelligence. And we want people to have a connection with community. We want people who are empathetic and understand other people's situation, but also to understand that when we do things, how they affect other people. That's a really important piece. So, and one of the other pieces of emotional intelligence is the ability to actually do reality checking. If you're a quick decision maker and you're very assertive and you can, on the fly make decisions, it would be important for you to be able to also have developed your reality piece, the reality checking piece, so that you make those decisions based on checking into reality versus on an emotional sort of gut reaction. And don't we all know people that make gut reactions that don't necessarily, and it doesn't necessarily work out for them. So this is where we want to be able to have this well-rounded piece so that all the things are working in harmony. In fact, there's 16 subscales and they all work together. Today, we're not going to talk about those really. What I want to do is talk about the underpinning of emotional intelligence, which is really to do with that self-perception, those self-sabotaging beliefs that we have. And those are the pieces that I believe makes a huge, huge difference in success. So really it's about this kind of what I call self-awareness piece, and understanding, and because it's really the underpinning of a high EQ and success. So Grace, I know for you, you probably remember, you can probably pull up an experience for yourself, and I know our listeners today as well. I want to just share with you a recent experience that I had that really shows the distinction between what can happen with in a situation where you've got a more highly developed higher EQ in terms of your impulse control than someone else. And this was obviously based on something going on for this person. Obviously, we didn't have a conversation. So recently we made a trip to Europe, and on one of our last legs of the journey, we arrived at the airport, and to be told that not only was our flight delayed, it was actually in fact canceled. And it was an international flight. Now that's pretty upsetting. You know, you're packed, you got yourself up early in the morning and all that, and you arrive at the airport. And then you go and you ask a question of someone, and they say you go stand here, and then it's the wrong place. And finally you get into a queue that you look around and my goodness, it's a very long queue. And we've all been in situations like this. So in that particular moment, you have an opportunity to respond, to react to that situation. So, what I observed was that there were various different people who were having different responses. And this one gentleman, he was really upset. And he was telling everyone about all the things that, like, you know, up and down this queue, all the things that were really upsetting to him about being late. That if he didn't make this particular time, this was going to happen and everything else. And, you know, everyone else is around just sort of observing this. Well, this gentleman gets to the ticket agent, and of course he takes a strip off of her. Now, there's really nothing that she could have done to prevent this situation. She's just the person in the customer service booth dealing with people and looking to redirect them. And of course, he's being extremely demanding, what I consider to be, you know, quite irrational. And now, if you think about that situation, how interested is that ticket agent in actually helping him get to his destination when he'd like to? What do you think about that, Grace?
She may be trying to get rid of him. That might be one possibility, but yeah. She's not going to be feeling very good. She's going to feel attacked.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you know, if she has an opportunity there, well, you know, I mean, I don't want to see she would intentionally do something, but his luggage might go one direction and he might go another direction. But the fact of the matter is, she's really not, you know, she will do what she has to do in terms of her job, but she won't give any extra. So at the end of the day, this particular gentleman, you know, didn't end up getting on a faster flight or anywhere else. He ended up, we ended up being late for a particular meeting that he was going to, and somewhere probably underneath that meeting had triggered something for him. So there was also a reason for him to have been so upset about missing this meeting. It may have been that maybe his job was at risk and he needed to be at this meeting. Maybe he knew that this was, you know, one of those kinds of meetings where he was going to hold on to a big contract, and he had this tape running in his head that, you know, you never get these big contracts. So here was something to thwart his intention of that. So there was this big emotional response. Well, then my husband and I go up to the ticket agent, and, you know, we're feeling really badly for her. So, you know, we say this, you know, this must be really tough for you, you know, all of these unhappy people, where they're needing to go. I mean, yes, we're in the last leg of our vacation, and, you know, little do we want to spend 5 hours in the Rome airport, but this is what I guess it's going to have to be. In fact, it ended up being more than that. But she did her very, in fact, she got us on an earlier flight. You know, there were a bunch of things that happened that just made it all work. And I believe that was because we had actually checked into our emotional state and didn't decide to take it on to somebody, that didn't decide to throw up on somebody else about our emotions. And that's just an example of emotional intelligence, that we can in the moment understand what our triggers are, that we can almost step back a little bit and have that ability to kind of look around and see what happens. So that was just an example of our personal lives and obviously our business lives. Grace, before I go into some exercises, what might be a question you might have for me immediately out of this?
Well, I wanted to make a comment first, Kerry. I was thinking about, I'm a very visual thinker, and I was thinking about the idea of deposits and withdrawals. But in a sense, what you did in that interaction with the flight attendant is that you made a deposit. You said it must be hard for you. You know, you gave her some sympathy because she probably was feeling very harried. And the other man was very reactive and it was harsh with her and made withdrawals. And so it's also something about, are we able to make a deposit or a withdrawal in our response to something? Usually when it's a reaction, it's a withdrawal. It's a, you know, in the moment emotional reaction, as opposed to making a considered response.
Yes, absolutely.
Which isn't a
So
question, but I'm making a
yeah,
comment.
no, but that's very good. In fact, in that moment, that person might have actually quite a high developed assertiveness subscale in his
Hmm.
emotional intelligence, and that may be good in in kind of the work that they do. But to counterbalance that, he would also need to have a high level of empathy, because with assertiveness, we need to understand how our reactions or how we are responding to people and reacting to people can actually have an effect on someone else. So in that situation, he didn't have that sense of empathy to understand, she's just the person at the other end of the phone, um, and to be able to understand that. Recently I had another situation where I tried to make an online reservation to a restaurant. Their reservation system wasn't working. It was quite frustrating. We had another couple that we were traveling there. I was just phoning to confirm. There was no reservation there. And so afterwards, I thought to myself, I'm going to phone and just, comment. And I got a young girl on the phone, and I said to her, I appreciate the fact that you're just taking this message for me, but I want to tell you that it was very frustrating for me as a customer standpoint to try and make a reservation using the system that you've got. And I think it would be really good feedback for you to be able to give your owner, manager, whoever sort of set this policy, to know what it is. So if you're hearing a little bit of frustration in my voice, yeah, I'm frustrated because, four of us, we were going to come for brunch. It was going to be, we planned on it. I tried, several different ways to actually make a reservation. In addition to that, their phone was automatically going into a voicemail system. It was pretty crazy what was happening. And I said to her, I know you can hear the frustration in my voice, but please, this isn't about you. I just want you to deliver this message to the owner. And, within a very short period of time, I got a call back from the owner who just said, look, this is good feedback. We need to get this information. I want to be able to provide a system that's going to work. Clearly it hasn't, all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, and he was very gracious. He gave me a gift certificate to come in to use the restaurant. So at the end of the day, the girl on the phone didn't feel taken advantage of or feel badly. She was just accepting the information as it was. I got an opportunity to give some feedback to a restaurant that's now maybe going to make some changes as a result of it. So it was a win-win all the way around. But if I'd gone on the phone and just yelled and screamed, how would that have been a win-win, right? So you're right. You're saying that kind of bank account, Go ahead.
Yes. My question was, in fact, that when someone makes a complaint to you about your service or something about your service, it's easy to feel defensive because it's our baby, whatever. Any tips on a useful approach when someone gives feedback we mightn't perhaps like?
That's a great question. And when I go through this bit of an exercise, it'll be a good way to you to kind of debrief on a situation. But I will just respond to this immediately. The ability for us to actually become to not let that situation trigger us, because when we actually become emotional or react to someone who gives us some, let's say, negative feedback, it's actually triggering something inside us, that little gremlin saying, could be something like, there you go, you've been found out, you're not as good as you think you are, or you're telling you are, or everyone now knows you're a fraud, or whatever this negative voice is in here. And for those of you who are listening to this or watching this today, if you are not aware that you have this little inner critic in your head, or what in the coaching world we call your gremlin, I would just really encourage you to start listening to what it's saying, not necessarily agreeing, but any time that inner voice comes in. Sometimes it's loud, we can hear it in our head. Sometimes we feel it in our emotions. It's because whatever event has happened, it's triggered something in us, which is usually some kind of a self-sabotaging or limiting belief that we've got. So one of the first things is to recognize that that's what's going on. Obviously, deep breathing, and to really sort of walk yourself through to not engage, to really be dispassionate. And I know, Grace, you do this work with your clients to help them, when they've got difficult conversations that they've got to go into, or they're in difficult relationships, is rather than getting triggered by something, is to actually just be, kind of take that step back. And that's absolutely no different in the situation. Because it really isn't about, it's our baby that's being attacked. That's the surface level, that's what it's about. But really underneath, it's about some self-doubt, some self conversation. And Grace, this is more your bailiwick than it is mine, but you see this all the time. So let's go and let's do a little bit of an exercise. I love this. We're going to do this. So this is about sort of diffusing the self-defeating beliefs and replace them with more adaptive and realistic beliefs. Because that's really the underpinning of emotional intelligence. Because if self-regard, one of the subscales, is low for you, then it's probably because there's a lot of weight or credence to what that inner voice is saying, those limiting beliefs that we've got. If you lack assertiveness, it's because there's something going, some sort of tape in there that's saying, if I am bold and say what I need to say in the situation, this is what the outcome is going to be. So, all of those, so your ability to self-express your emotions, to be able to speak those. For self-actualization, that's that goal setting, that moving forward to reaching and constant improving. Well, if somewhere there's a tape in there that's saying, why bother? Because no matter what you do, you're never going to be a success anyway, or whatever it happens to be, that's going to limit you. And Grace, would you agree with me that you hear a lot of this in the counseling world?
I certainly do. I certainly do. And I also have, of course, struggled with some of this myself. So I have personal experience as well as professional experience. And it is a huge thing because I think we tend to people's on in our minds whether or not it's true. Absolutely. It has credibility for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And and none of us are immune to it. It's to the degree to which we become aware of it and we replace those limiting beliefs with other beliefs, and we don't let them trigger us. So let's do this little exercise today. So what I'd like you to do is, and this is about those sort of outdated tapes, that automatic response we have, and what we want you to respond is in a way that's different. And I love telling my clients that when they first come to work with me, I give them a PhD from the University of Making Stuff Up. And really that's the kind of underpinning of this as well, is that something happens and we make it mean something. It may have nothing to do with it at all. In fact, this book that I'm actually going to be doing some exercises out of, called The EQ Edge, I highly recommend it. This particular book talks about a situation where there's a young couple. She's been away at university. She comes back. She's driven back. He lives across the street. He hasn't heard from her. He knows she's back in town. And immediately he starts to think, oh, she's met somebody else. And there's a reason why she hasn't called me. And yada, 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 yada. All this sort of negative stuff in his head. And in fact, when he finally talks to her, she was just absolutely exhausted, and she wanted to be fresh and not tired when she saw him. So she didn't pick up the phone and call him. But he immediately made that reaction, and that's a perfect example of someone who made that mean something else. So here's the exercise. I'd like you on a piece of paper to write 5 columns, and sort of make like a table, 5 columns, and at the top of each column, on the top of the left-hand one, write A, the next one B, the next one C, the next one D, and the next one E. Okay? So this is the exercise, and really it's and the piece of this is that A leads to B and B leads to C. So you can, and the good news is you can change the consequences, which is the C, by identifying and diffusing self-limiting beliefs or self-defeating beliefs and replacing them with these more realistic and adaptive beliefs. So the first thing you're going to do is I want you to, so you've written the column, you've got these columns, think of an upsetting situation that's happened for you over the past week, and in column C, consequence column, write down what your unpleasant feelings were and what behaviors accompanied them. Now, we're not going to take the time to do this entire exercise, but just take a few notes so that you can go back and do this. So what were these unpleasant feelings and behaviors that accompanied it at the time? So this is helping you become aware of what went on. So first of all, what is the, what's going on? Okay. So Grace,
So
have you got
can
that
I just
first?
clarify here? So
You bet.
I just want to clarify. So A is the event, and B is how it made you feel and
Actually,
think.
no.
Is that, and then C is the
C is actually the consequence. So we're going to just deal with that one first. So C, you write down C first, which is how you were feeling. So it could be, I felt sad, worried, pessimistic, withdrawn, whatever that it happens to be. Okay. Now the next step is you're going to write down in A what that incidence is. So that's correct. So it's the incidence or the activating event, thinking of A, that seemed to trigger this upsetting situation. Okay. And I've given you the example of this young couple. So he sees her car in the driveway, and she hasn't called. So that's what the event is. And I like to say those are just the facts. That's just the event with no emotion around it. It's just car in driveway, hasn't called, period. So the key aspect of this ABCDE approach is now to capture your B's. And that's almost imperceptible, easily overlooked self-talk that was triggered by the activating event. So in C, you talked about, we wrote down the consequences. Those were your emotions. But B, you want to pin down what it is that went on in your mind right after the activating event. So for an example, this young man identified that, oh, well, the self-talk that went underneath there is that she hasn't called me equals she's met someone else, and I'm not worthy of her anyway because she's the one who's gone away to university and I haven't, all of those kinds of things, that kind of a conversation. Okay. He might also have said things like, well, she should have called. She's probably lost interest in me. I bet you if he's found somebody else, I knew this would happen. Nothing ever works out for me. I'll never find anyone like her again, and I can't stand this feeling. Okay, so then this is where the fun part of the exercise happens. D is to debate, dispute, and discard the manipulative, self-defeating beliefs that gave rise to your things you wrote down in column C. And this is where we have to do some rigorous analysis or questioning of that internal monologue that we've got going on. Was in the book, they say rigorous examination by asking yourself some questions. So I'm going to have you write down these questions, and then this will be your homework if you'd like to do this exercise. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, where's the proof? So this is where you're looking for objective and verifiable evidence that supports the beliefs, all of that list of beliefs that I told you this young gentleman had, or the lack thereof, if there's no belief, if there's no evidence that's there. In fact, this young man had no objective proof that she'd lost interest in him. Like, there was none at all. He was making all of that up. Did she seem less loving? Well, no, because she hadn't had a conversation with him. Okay. In fact, she hadn't been calling him any less frequently than she normally had, so there was no evidence there for him to think that. So then the next question you want to ask yourself is, are there alternative, more logical explanations to explain the activating event? So this is where you'd write down things for an example. So of any conceivable alternative. She was tired after the long drive and fell asleep. Her and her parents had gone out to visit someone there was an appointment booked immediately. She had just arrived home moments before and was busy just talking to her folks. Her parents had demanded that she immediately spend some time with them. So she might have been sick and she's gone to bed. She wanted to maybe unpack and freshen up before she saw him. There's a whole list of other possible scenarios. So then the next question you're going to ask yourself is, if someone asked me for advice, and I think this one's brilliant. If someone asked me for advice about this scenario, What might I say that could help alter his or her perspective? You know, Grace, I know you and I've talked about this. Is it so for me, that is for moving from being the person in it to actually being the coach, really. You know, to kind of being able to step outside and give myself the advice that I would give myself if I was a coach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, if we can do that, you know, so what advice would we say, or you know, what would your parents say? But you know, so what would you say to someone to alter their perspective? So it might have been helpful to imagine that if his good friend had come to him with the same situation, what might have he said to him? He might have said, well, hold on, you guys have been dating for a long time. There's really no evidence that, you know, you've had a good relationship. You haven't had any challenges. She phones you regularly. There's no evidence at all that she doesn't want to be with you. I think you're making things worse. Why don't you just get up and, you know, go and knock on the door and see what happens? Just don't sit here and ruminate with all of these bad ideas going through your head. Okay? And that's probably the advice you would give someone who was in a situation like that. Would that be right? Of course it would be. It's funny we don't give that to ourselves. So that's one of the things. Then 2 more questions, and then your homework will be done for the day. Have I ever had a similar situation before? Held a similar belief, only to find out it was wrong? So for Bobby, for an example, what he learned from the situation is that he often catastrophizes the early stages of a relationship with new girlfriends. He had a girlfriend actually that he dated a couple of years ago, and she was late meeting, and actually he was late. She was late meeting him, and he always overreacted. So he's aware now. Oh, okay, I tend to overreact in those situations. It was another. So it's just finding some other examples where that same sort of situation happened, and to have the ability to kind of step back and look at it. And then here's the last question for column D. So this is the dispute, debate, and discard column. So think of the D's. So if the answer was yes, there was similar scenarios in the past, did I learn anything from that outcome? And can I apply that knowledge to this situation? Well, this young man realized that he tends to think the worst when it comes to new girlfriends. And he imagines the worst, that he imagines they've lost interest and they got interest in someone else. And that belief turns out to be a reflection of his own lack of self-confidence. So look at the amount of awareness just from these questions that have been asked. So then finally, in column E, this is the last piece, is write down the effects of filling in column D. How debating, disputing, and discarding have shifted your understanding and beliefs about the activating event, and consequently your feelings and behaviors. So these are the effects. So I love this. You know, you've got the activating event, you've got your beliefs, you've got the consequences, you've done the disputing, debating, and discarding, and now you're going to take a look at it as to how it's going to affect that event that happened. And that it gives you that ability to be able to step back and be able to look through that scenario, and that's going to give you that experience to be able to build on that for future events that happen. Because if you use this approach, that will help diffuse those illogical and really manipulative internal beliefs you have, more effective and adaptive behaviors can happen. And so in business, I mean, this obviously happens in personal lives, but in business, it's really important. You know, you have a client that doesn't call you when they said they were going to call you. So that's the activating event. Now you can go to C, which is, well, they've changed their mind. They don't want to work with me. You know, I really need that money, and here we go again. And if you look at the beliefs are as, well, you know, people actually don't want to work with me. I mean, you can go, it's because I don't offer good value. No matter what I do, it's never good enough for clients. I mean, you can work all the way down that. Instead, the fact is the client probably just forgot to call. Just basic. So, Grace, tell me what you think about this, this exercise.
I think it's very useful, Kerry, because it slows down that sort of mental processing that can happen in an instant where we overreact to something. And when we go into D, we're disputing it. We're sort of we're thinking of reassuring and encouraging alternatives based on our experience in the past. And then, of course, in E, we feel more relaxed. We feel more reassured. We're more likely to make a rational choice than if we go with what we felt in C.
Yes. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, it's very useful to break it down.
Good. Excellent. Well, I know we've gone a little longer than our normal time today, but I wanted to really get you this exercise and give you kind of the underpinning, because I'm certified now in EQ and EQ 360 assessments, and so I really feel strongly that this is really the underpinning. So our next episode, episode 60, is going to be looking at feelings and how your feelings may be fueling your self-defeating belief system. So we're going to work on some of that in our next episode. Because again, I want you to be successful. I want your business to be successful. And if you have these self-limiting beliefs that keep thwarting your intentions all the way around, it's going to be an issue. So Grace, just in closing, what's your final takeaway from today?
Lots, Kerry. It's going to be just noticing the effect of the self-talk and how we can change direction once we're aware of that self-talk is not leading us in a good place.
Excellent. That's great.
And so that if we change the self-talk, we have different behaviors, we have different results. Absolutely.
You bet. You might end up arriving at the same destination as your luggage, and maybe even on an earlier flight than you were planned to go on anyway, you know? So again, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Remember, you can, if you're watching this on my website, there's lots of other videos for you to be able to watch. There's also my ebook, How to Get Out of Overwhelm and Accelerate Your Business Now. So you can download that, and I look forward to communicating with you. Thanks again, Grace, for being on my episode today, and have an awesome week, everybody. Bye-bye.